what is your culture telling you about what you're doing right? What is your culture telling you about what you're doing wrong? And understanding that a culture is a set of rules and expectations, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best way of viewing life. Basically, as we've been saying this whole podcast, you do you understand
Yeah.
your own strengths. I think that for me, that's just come down to what makes me happy is just accepting myself and not letting culture dictate what I like about myself.
Hello, and welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review, tell a friend, help get the word out there. Thea Orozco is an author, MBTI consultant, and coach. It's her life mission to help underrepresented voices be heard in a confident and authentic way. For the past 8 years, Thea has been focusing on helping introverts who want to live life on their own terms. Thea is the author of The Introvert's Guide to the Workplace, concrete strategies for bosses and employees to thrive and succeed.
All right. Hello, everybody. And I'm excited to have my guest, Thea Orozco. Thea, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we were talking before the show. We've interacted a lot over the years, but we've never actually met. So I'm really excited to get into the work that you've been doing, especially the book that you recently put out. And so we will get going. But
Sounds good.
first, tell us about yourself and your journey to understand that you are an introvert and how that led to the work you do with introverts now.
Yeah, well, I'm not entirely sure when I first had the inkling I was an introvert. I'm guessing it was in college. I probably read something somewhere, but I didn't really know what it meant. And then I took an online MBTI. I guess it was probably, 16 personalities or something like that, one of the informal, non-official ones. And I found out I was an INFJ, and that's when I really started looking into introversion. And it was a revelation, really understanding what introversion was. And it blew my mind that I wasn't broken, like I was just an introvert. And then I was a few years ago, maybe I think it was 8 years ago, right before Susan Cain's TED Talk. No, wait, right after Susan Cain's TED Talk, before her book came out. I was on Twitter marketing one of my businesses at that time. And in the span of 2 weeks, I saw two people describe something about their life. And it was clear to me that they were an introvert comparing themselves to extroverts, whereas they thought they were broken. So I told them both, from what you're describing, it sounds actually like you're an introvert. And, we're 30, at that time, it was 30% of the population, we thought. And I sent them a link to Susan Cain's TED Talk, and they were just so surprised. They, like me, thought that there was something wrong with them, but really there wasn't. And then I thought, okay, more people need to be told that they aren't broken, that they're an introvert. We just live in an extroverted society that dictates, what the norm should be versus really anything based on reality. or
Right.
because I think the most recent percentage is 56.8, if I'm remembering correctly. US population are introverts, so technically we're the majority. It's just that the culture has decided that we shall be extroverts. So yeah, I tweeted the Susan Cain's TED Talk to them, and then I thought, okay, more people clearly need to be told that they're not broken, they're just an introvert. So I set up a Facebook page and a Twitter account just basically to spread that message. And then it kind of blew up. The Facebook page got 10,000 likes pretty quickly, and I thought, okay, well, what can I do with this? And I just kept tweeting, and I got a life coaching certificate, and here I am.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like we started about the same time probably. And that's it. So many
Yeah.
people still think they're broken. And that's why
Yeah.
we're doing this work, because you're not broken. It's just a
Yeah.
natural way of being. And it's understanding, here's my strengths, here's my needs, and they're going to be different from somebody else. I like that statistic, 56%, because, I go with about half,
Mhm.
56%, that's even more. Um,
Yeah.
I go with about half, and people are surprised by that. But when they're surprised, it means they don't understand what introversion is. They really are still associating it with somebody that's shy, that type of thing.
Yeah.
When it's really that we are deep thinkers, we spend a lot of time thinking and or feeling, and it's natural for us.
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to change, but it's something, if you understand, you can really be, your best self, and not try to be like somebody else. And
Yeah.
there's so many people that still think there's something wrong with them, and
Yeah.
not it. I talked to plenty of people that always understood their introversion and always embraced it, but more of the people I talked to, they were a little bit older, or
Mm.
cases similar to ours. So
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work to do. What were some
There is.
things that you embraced that you didn't understand before you took the MBTI and other things like that?
Um, well, I didn't have a huge group of friends, for one. I
Yeah.
had some just very close friends. And even though, some of my family were introverts, other members of my family criticized them for that. So, like, my grandmother just had one friend, and my father thought that was, oh, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the person, the
Yeah.
family member who that was. Oh, it's okay. You can keep this in. It's fine. I just
Okay.
mental note. don't, don't use the person's role. Anyway, my father, just because I've already said that, my
Yeah.
father just didn't think that was right. He criticized that. And I took that to heart. And I thought that, that was also criticism to me. And just things like that, subtle things, either from family members or just general society, because I didn't understand also that there was a difference between introversion and shyness. I had been told that I was shy from many people, but I definitely have this confident,
Streak.
authoritative
Yeah.
streak to me
Yeah.
that doesn't really, blend with the idea of shy. So, I have a shy side too, but yeah, so I knew, this society is very heavily anti-shy, so that the fact that I didn't understand really that difference between introvert and shy also really affected my view of myself. So it was just kind of amazing when I found out that I was an introvert and that I was an INFJ, and the difference between introversion and shy, and that, there's nothing wrong with us. We just need the room to be ourselves in the society.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, if you understand, so definitely extroverts or introverts can be shy. And I always say, to me, quiet isn't shy, it's that I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Shyness is really where you're lacking confidence. And I think that can be a major factor if someone wants to overcome shyness, is really just understanding introversion and
Yeah.
understanding what that means. And just for example, when I was getting certified in the Myers-Briggs that you mentioned, the facilitator said, introverts think and then speak. And that was a huge epiphany for me, because I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's true. And
Yeah.
extroverts um, speak in order to think, you
Yeah.
know? And if you don't understand that, and you're trying to think and then speak, and someone else is talking kind of nonstop, and they're also saying, why are you so quiet?
Mhm.
Guess what can make you shy? That
Yeah.
definitely can have an impact,
Yeah.
like, and I guess I'm shy. But so if you can understand all that, that can change things for you and help you gain that confidence.
Yeah.
So we're definitely on the Quiet and Strong podcast. We talk about strengths and needs of introversion, strategies for success. And we also like to bust a myth or two. So what's an introversion myth or two that you would like to bust today?
Well, we already talked about shyness. I think that's
Yep.
that's the
Yeah, that's a
big
big one. Yeah,
thing.
probably the
Yeah.
biggest.
Yeah. I also think that there's a big myth that we can't be leaders. And I think that's fundamentally like incorrect, because there's different types of leadership, there's different types of interacting with the world, and there's definitely a version of leadership that introverts can be excellent at. So I think a lot of people, including a family member, have told me that introverts can't be leaders because they have this thought of being, kind of a very talkative, aggressive person, as a leader. And introverts don't, the quiet type of introverts, there's aggressive introverts too, but there's definitely a type of leadership that lends itself to how most introverts are comfortable being in the world. And that includes taking information, thinking and then speaking. So I think a lot of introverts are great leaders, especially when it comes to bringing in the thoughts and the voices of other people and then synthesizing it and then letting everybody know what the decision is and what the way forward is, versus just acting like you're in charge and therefore everybody should listen to you. So I think that's a big myth, that introverts can't be leaders, that we have to fit into this certain mold, or else we always have to be in the background, and we definitely don't. Some introverts want to be in the leaders, some people don't, and that's all fine. But we all have our own way of being in this world, and I'm all for embracing our way.
Yeah, so that's a big one. Introverts can't be great leaders, or can't be this, or can't be that. And with 56% of the population, as you said, of course introverts are great leaders, but it's going to
Yeah.
look different,
Yeah.
and they can bring a lot of strengths to that. So we were going to get into this anyway, might as well now. You write in your book about leadership. So what are some strategies for the introverted leader?
Well, you can't be a leader without followers. So I think for me, the signs of a great leader is communication skills, and that can be different for introverts and extroverts. I think, again, as we spoke about, introverts tend to think and then speak. Extroverts tend to speak to think. And so I think if an introvert wants to be a leader, they need to really understand what their best way of interacting is, what they need to be a good leader, what they need to really listen to the people who are looking at them for leadership, and communicate in the best way for you, and communicate in the best way for the people who are following you, because they might be introverts too, or they might be extroverts. So I think communication is definitely key. You need to understand your way of communicating, but also understand that people are different, and be able to meet the person halfway. And I think that's really just important overall.
Absolutely. So, well, let's go there. So, your book is The Introvert's Guide to the Workplace: Concrete Strategies for Bosses and Employees to Thrive and Succeed. So, we already mentioned that you talk about leadership in the book, and you started to mention communication. That's a key point. I was telling you before we hit record that I really like that you put bosses and employees, because I could understand myself as an introvert and understand what I need. But if my boss doesn't understand those needs, then that could really be a lot of conflict, and not success for me. Same way, the other way around. If I'm supervising somebody, I need to know what their needs are, whether they're introvert or extrovert. What their communication styles are. So I like that you wrote both. So what caused you to write a book? You've done a lot of work in the introvert space. What caused you to write a book about the workplace?
To be totally honest, the publisher contacted me. So
Okay.
I
All right.
was just like, okay. Why not? And then it became one of the most stressful times of my life. But yes, I thought, it's it was something that was needed. That's kind of one of the reasons why I said yes. Like I understood it would be very stressful. So I thought about it, I'm like, okay, is this a book that's needed? Is this the book I can write? And I thought there was a great need for a book about introversion that can speak to both, bosses and the people themselves, the workers themselves. And really, like, one of the things I was trying to do with the book is really hit home about how so much of the concepts of introversion is based on culture, and how much culture influences our concept of what makes a broken person, right? And what is the right way of leadership. And really, I find it fascinating that culture dictates so much of our life and our way of showing up in life. And I wanted bosses and employees to understand that, the person you're talking to is different from you, and that's okay. And the person you're talking to needs a certain communication style. They need a certain way of having their office set up or something like that in order to do their best work. So that's something that, I'm very, very passionate about, is just the idea that, we're all different and we need to be respected for that. There's no broken people, essentially. So workplace, I've obviously been in the workplace for many, many years, and it's hard. It's hard. Often a very hard place to be. I was once working at the head office of a bank, and it was open office plan, and that was just torture. And there was just small things they could have done in the workplace to have made it more introvert friendly, but again, there's this idea of like one size fits all, when that's not at all true, and they weren't making it possible for me to do my best work.
Yeah, and you're right. That could definitely apply to our physical environments too.
Yeah.
It's important to have a good physical environment, and it might just be a small change.
Yeah.
And we need to understand what our strengths are, and other people need to understand what our strengths are, because I know for myself, I've spent plenty of time trying to be somebody I wasn't. And when I really got to know who I was and what I was good at, and worked to focus there, oh, it made the world a difference.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is your strength as an introvert? Sometimes we call them superpowers. And then, what have you seen in others? Because again, we're all different. So, we're
Yeah.
both introverts, but we're going to have some things in common, but we're going to have some different strengths as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think my biggest strength is problem solving. So I love to, just look at the world around me, and do some creative problem solving. Right now I'm fostering a cat. I'm planning to be a foster parent for infants. And I just love the interaction between me and and nonverbal creatures, because there's problem solving there, right? There's, what do you need? And infants and cats are they communicate a lot, just not through words. And I love the problem solving of like trying to meet their needs and trying to understand them and have this kind of spark of, love and respect in a way that doesn't involve speaking, basically. So I think, that's one of my strengths, is problem solving. I love to do creative problem solving, and I think it really plays into my strength of listening, my strength of observing, because, I'm naturally quiet. As you said, that doesn't mean I'm shy. It's, quiet is a strength. And I think that's how my favorite way of using that quiet strength.
Yeah, and problem solving is so needed, and it's not equal. There's some
Yeah.
people, and that's one of my strengths too, but there's some people that are good at something else. And let's let them do that. And let's, if you're really good at problem solving, let's try to help you do more of that. And
Yeah.
it's not quiet in your head, I promise that, right?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
quiet because you're thinking,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
to problem solve. It's a lot of thinking, and a lot,
Mhm.
a lot of letting ideas roll around in your head. And sometimes it
Yeah.
takes some time, but that's a
Yeah.
gift. What are some other introvert gifts that maybe you've seen others have?
Well, I'm a big picture person, INFJ. There's a lot of other introverts that are detail oriented, and that's not me. Um, you know, eh, for the detail oriented, introvert bookkeepers, more power to you, because that's not my my thing. So, I see a lot of introverts who are just really good at details, who love to do that really fine work. I think there's some just great artists. I think introverts make great artists often because they can look at these details and incorporate what they've seen in the world into their art. Some of the other strengths, superpowers I've seen in my fellow introvert is introspection. They tend to look at themselves a lot, try and learn about themselves a lot. I think there's this kind of curiosity about their own mind that I've seen a lot. A lot of introverts are very interested in psychology, I found. Another superpower that I love is just the ability to listen. I really value in friendships someone who can, listen, and they aren't in the conversation in order to get energy from me. They're there to just be there for me, and I'm there to be there for them. And I think there's just so much power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about, you said you're a big picture person. I am too. Our Myers-Briggs type is similar. Mine's an INTJ, so just the little difference with the thinking and the feeling.
Mm.
But it's so important, and for some reason we're not all the same. We don't all have the same gifts, and it
Mhm.
works out. We complement each other,
Yeah.
and we really need that detailed person, but they really need the big picture person too.
Yeah.
So we need everybody,
Yeah.
introverts, extroverts. How would you classify a couple of the big needs that are different for introverts versus extroverts?
I think one is the amount of alone time. So, extroverts, they often, need to interact with people in order to feel the most like themselves. Extroverts also need alone time. Sometimes they just need to step back and be there by themselves. And, likewise, introverts, we're social beings still. But I think the main difference is, the amount of time you spend, what makes you feel the most like yourself. So there was actually a 2-week period maybe where my significant other was out of town, and I was like, oh, you know what? I'll do an experiment. I love experiments. Why don't I try and do something social each night over the next 2 weeks and see what happens? And I was just a wreck at the end of it. I didn't feel like myself. I wasn't actually stressed, but I just felt like disconnected from my own self. And so, we talk a lot about introversion and energy. And really, I think it's both physical energy and also like psychic energy. Like, how do you connect back with yourself? How do you feel the most like yourself? And I think for introverts, we often need that alone time to reconnect with our own thoughts. Whereas I think extroverts often need that social energy in order to feel the most like themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just you got to get to know yourself and what you need. There's certain people that could energize me, but at the same time, there's certain things that really drain me, and I have to get to know what those are. And the
Yeah.
alone time, it's definitely about recharging, but it's also I need time to think, to plan
Hmm.
out things, to dream, or just
Yeah.
to relax and have fun,
Yeah.
and of course, we all need connection. That's very important, and that's a big myth too. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of that came out in the pandemic. It's like, oh yeah, introverts, they're having a great time. It's like, no, I still need people. I
Yeah.
haven't seen this family member, that family member for a long time, and I do miss them, and want to get back together with them. But we definitely need some more alone time. But we need some people too sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's, as you said, another myth.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important also um, to understand what introversion is, and don't let the label influence the way you see yourself in terms of like trying to fit into this introvert label, and more use it as a way to understand yourself versus as a way to dictate how you should live your life.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's really a tool.
Yeah.
It's like I can learn a lot from you because we have a lot in common. But again, we're still have plenty that are differences, and so I can learn some things, but then I have to, who am I and what do I
Yeah.
need and where does that differ? So I love that you said that. And one time on my podcast, I said, describe what your strengths are and needs without using the word introvert. Be
Mm,
able to articulate, here's what I'm really good at, here's what I need each day. And don't tie it back into introversion, although that's, so it's a tool. The
it
Myers-Briggs that
is.
you that we both use, it's a good tool to help us get to know ourselves, but it's not to box us in. It's really to
Yeah.
say, here's some things to think about. Here's some
Yeah.
strategies that other people like you have used. But in the end, you're an individual who makes all
Yeah.
those decisions. And you know what you like, you know, no one else can tell you
Yeah.
that. And you know what works for you.
Yeah. And I think that it also involves just trust in yourself too.
Yeah. So what else do you want bosses and employees to know in the workplace? I know you mentioned communication or networking or public speaking. What are some things that maybe myths or maybe strategies for success?
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked a lot about communication. I'm trying to think what else besides communication. That's a big thing. For introverts, a lot of introverts I hear talk about how hard networking is. And again, this comes back to like, what's your best way of doing things? So there's quite a few different ways of networking. There's networking events, there's online networking, there's reaching out to your existing network and using them for getting contacts. So you know and also, like, I once had a client who a business owner who could get her own clients through random conversations, like at the supermarket or something like that. She was just great at sparking a conversation and bringing it back to what she's doing. And one of the reasons why she came to me was because she couldn't integrate that with her knowledge that she was an introvert, and basically she just wanted acknowledgement that it was okay for her to get clients that way. And my answer was like, yes, of course, you do you. Like, however, you can reach success is valid. So, I think in terms of like networking, you do you. I do okay with networking events. I occasionally find them interesting, but I really love social media. Like, I love the interactions. David, you and I have interacted a lot
Yeah.
over the years on social media, and I've gotten to know some just really interesting people that way. Many of which I met in real life too. So that's one of my favorite ways of networking is just interacting with people on social media. So again, you do you. Like, what's your way of networking? And I would just, lean into that.
I love the point that you just made, because if you hear the word networking, that's what comes to most people's mind, is that event, where you're
Yeah.
supposed to meet every single person and get their card and all that good stuff. And that approach really doesn't work that well for us. And that's what comes to mind. But really, what are you trying to accomplish with networking?
Mhm.
And there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah.
And if you do go to that event, you know, what's your goal there and how are you going to accomplish it? Mostly I'm probably going to try to have a couple really good, deep conversations with somebody that maybe I know, maybe I don't know. But if I did need to meet certain people or a lot of people for some reason, I could do it, but
Mhm.
I should do it figuring out my introverted way of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up goals, because that's really important. So that's something I've also noticed with a lot of clients, is that, they have this idea of, oh, I need to go to networking events. I need to, I don't know, start a blog or whatever. And they lose sight of the fact like of the idea of why. Because I think the idea of why can really lead you to the best way of doing it yourself. So as you said, like, why do you want to go to a networking event? Is it just because everyone's saying you should go to a networking event?
Right.
And really think about what's the way of doing what's the way of reaching the goals that works best for me.
Yeah. So you do you. I like that. That's a good way to
Yeah.
put it, and figure out it might not be an event. It might be social media. It might be reaching out in some other way that works for you.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the thing I've learned is it has to work for you. Otherwise it's draining and
Yeah.
not very effective.
No, it isn't. Is it? It's because you can't be effective if you're drained.
No. Another need that's really big that I know is important for me as an introvert is just to prepare because, we like to think about things and often I know if I'm giving a speech or if I'm doing a presentation or even a meeting, I'd like to prepare. And I know you've written about this in your book. So talk about that, like the importance of preparation for introverts, especially in the workplace.
Yeah. Again, this is different. Like some introverts, they like the spontaneousness. I have ADHD, so I love to prepare, but I have kind of a different
Hmm.
relationship to
Yeah.
preparing to many other introverts. But yeah, I think preparation is often very, very important for us. And it does a few things. One, it builds confidence. I think it also, lets us have some time to reorganize our thoughts. And I think it's key for so many of us. So I've forgotten the question. I think maybe just mentioning ADHD made my brain just
Okay.
fizzle out. But
Yeah.
um, so preparation. Yeah. So one of the things I talked about in the book, I think, was about the importance of, like, if you're doing a presentation, I find it's really good to prepare. And so like if you're don't just, get up on stage and with a new topic, and even if you know it very well, sometimes our brains just like shut down, right? I've found if, with stress particularly, my brain will just shut down. So if I'm doing something stressful, especially for the first time, I try to really prepare. And if it's for like a presentation or a speech or something like that, I like to rehearse it so often that I don't really have to think about it anymore, because I've found that, if I try to memorize it, then I sound, robotic, versus if I just really try to understand the material, then it's much easier to discuss. So, I've been talking about introversion for quite a while, so by now I haven't had to prepare for, podcast interviews like this quite as much as I did in the first place. So when I first did interviews, like I really tried to prepare. Like I needed to, really sit down with those questions. Now I can just kind of look through them and think about them, and then, I don't require the same level of preparation anymore. So I think that's also really important, is to understand, what level of preparation do you need, and the realization that the preparation is fine. Like if you are bad at like just getting up on stage and talking quickly about like anything, then that's okay. Though I just had this memory of being in Toastmasters. I don't know if you've ever been in Toastmasters, David.
Familiar. I haven't really done it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, one of the things I only went for maybe about a year, and it wasn't for me. But one of the things in Toastmasters is that you get called, or maybe you volunteer. I don't know. Anyway, one of the tasks during the meetings is getting up on the stage and speaking about a random topic for, I think it's 3 minutes. And that's just so stressful.
Hmm.
So stressful. But I found that the more I did it, the easier it became. So I think that's another really interesting aspect of just human behavior in general, is, the more you do it, the more comfortable you become. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah, it's funny. While you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, you and I, we could talk about introversion all day long. It's just something that we're expert in, right? And we enjoy. So that's something to know. So if I'm getting up to speak about something that I know really well, yeah, the preparation's not going to be the same. I'm
Yeah.
also not one to memorize. If that's what works for you, great, do that.
Yeah.
But I'm not one to memorize. I'm one to really think about what I want to say. And it's funny too. It's like if you have to do something impromptu, can you do that? And sometimes it's going to work better than others. But I think another thing in my journey is just realizing, you know what, you're going to prepare the best you can.
Mhm.
And then sometimes you need to say, hey, let me think
Yeah.
about that, and not stress about if you don't know all the answers right off, and
Yeah.
not stress if you have to think for a second, or if you don't know, if you need to say, let me get back to you. But that's all part of this journey, is getting to know yourself, and
Mhm.
just prepare, be your expert where you can, and then relax, and sometimes that's
Yeah.
easier said than done.
Yeah. But yeah, I like what you said. And like, if you need some time to think, I think it's really important. So, if your, boss asks you something in a meeting, try to establish a relationship beforehand where they're okay with you saying, you know what, can I think about that and get back to you? Because if they're a good boss, they should be okay with that. They should be okay with you doing you. You needing to do the research or think about it further, because we like to think first and then speak. So just in terms of, while I'm speaking about meetings, so while I was working at a 9 to 5, if there was a meeting coming up, I like to prepare. So I like looking at the memo, if there is a memo beforehand, if there was an agenda. If there wasn't, see if you can find one, see if whoever is running the meeting can tell you just a little bit about what's going on, and then try to gather my thoughts beforehand. Not necessarily rehearse what I want to say, because oftentimes I found in meetings, if I rehearse it, then I can't really be present. I'm just going through, what I want to say over and over, and I'm not
Yeah,
really
right,
listening to
right,
what
right.
everyone else is saying. So I felt that that level of preparation during meetings was my sweet spot. Just thinking about, okay, yeah, I want to say X, Y, and Z. I want to talk about these topics in the next meeting versus memorizing. But yeah, I think that's key when you're working in a team, and when you're communicating in team. I think it really helps to prepare. And I kind of like this whole new switch to Slack and things like that, where we can discuss things in a non-instantaneous way, so that we can have these moments to think.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times we do like to communicate in writing,
Mhm.
and sometimes that's better, sometimes it's not. And we just have to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
For meetings, I try to just make my own little agenda, look ahead, and like you were saying, just kind of write down, okay, I need to make these points, and here's the questions that I have. And if I
Yeah.
do that, then I'm ready. And just always keeping in mind, you do want to give most of your responses during the meeting, but sometimes you may need to pull that. I just need a little time to think about that. And if people get to know you, and if you do come up with some good ideas, they'll start to respect that.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll start to see that you actually come up with your best ideas when you have that moment to think. So it's, again, we're going back to like respecting the person for who they are and not expecting them to be someone they're not. And I think respect, it goes a long way to getting the best out of employees and bosses.
That's it right there. It's like we do all want each other to do our best.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we have to understand our natural gifts and abilities and strengths, for
Yeah.
sure. Is there anything else from the book that you wanted to bring up?
Um, yeah, good question. I can't really remember what I wrote in them.
Okay, okay.
So long ago. Okay, well, something I wrote in the book was just about how we're all looking at our culture. We're all looking at the world through cultural lenses. And I think that's I've already talked about this a little, but I think that's really important. What is your culture telling you about what you're doing right? What is your culture telling you about what you're doing wrong? And understanding that a culture is a set of rules and expectations, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best way of viewing life. Basically, as we've been saying this whole podcast, you do you understand
Yeah.
your own strengths. I think that for me, that's just come down to what makes me happy is just accepting myself and not letting culture dictate what I like about myself.
Yeah. So you do you, but you also help other people around you be
Yeah.
themselves too, and that's
Yeah.
that's the whole point of this book. And again, you've done a lot of other great work outside this book. You've done a lot of other courses and lots of different things related to introverts. You've been an introvert champion for a lot of years now. um, is there anything else that we missed that you want folks to know?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I should have prepared a little better, David.
Yeah, hey,
I
it's
don't know.
okay, you can have some time to think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. No, I think that's it. I mean, I have some
Okay.
courses. If anybody wants to do podcasts in order to, widen their reach, whether you can do this as an employee too, just podcasts, just to, you know, um, kind of get it out there in the world. I have a course on podcasts and comfortable selling too, because I'm big into um, being able to sell in a way that it's comfortable for you. So I have those courses on introvertology.com. You can find it there.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, so sales, podcasting, it can all be done by the introvert. You just got to know the
Yes.
best way for you to do it. And so
Yes.
that's a lot of miss. All right. And people can find you at Introvertology.
Yes. Introvertology
Introvertology.
.com.
Yep.
Yep. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter. Oh, I just got on TikTok. Oh, I don't think I'm gonna do anything there, but
I
it
haven't
got
tried
me.
that yet, but
Oh, I resisted for so long, but we'll
all
see.
right, Thea. This has been a great conversation. Again, you've got a great book and a lot of great other
Thank you.
resources for people to really embrace who they are. It's been great to meet you, and thanks again for being on the Quiet and Strong podcast.
Thanks for inviting me again, David.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com. Check out the website, quietandstrong.com. I'll add social media channels for me and my guest to the show notes. Please comment on social media posts. Send me topics or guests you'd like to see on the show. There's so many great things about being an introvert, and so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.